RCMP is Canada's frontline defence against national security threats. But as those threats become more common and more complex, how are the Mounties dealing with them? I'm Mercedes Stephenson. The West Block starts now. Terrorism, cybercrime, and foreign interference are huge responsibilities, all under the RCMP umbrella. We sit down with the Commissioner of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, Mike Duheme, to talk national security.
The House shall stand adjourned.
And the House has risen for the summer. What were the highs and lows? And what's in the future for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau? Our Inside Politics panel joins us to wrap up the session. It's one of the world's most recognizable police forces, and when it comes to the law, the RCMP is the face of Canada in global security circles. That includes the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance, alongside the US, UK, Australia, and New Zealand, and the international criminal police organization, Interpol. The RCMP is seeing unprecedented threats, according to senior sources, from national security to foreign interference, and it's putting the pressure on the force like never before. Mike Duheme joined the front lines of the force 37 years ago and officially became the commissioner 2 months ago after several months as interim leader. Thanks so much for joining us, Commissioner.
Thanks for having me, Mercedes.
If you had to describe the complexity of the national security picture and the threats, what would you say?
I'd say when you're looking at the complexity is far greater than what we've seen before because of technology, because of the cyber aspect of everything, but also, and CSIS had shared this, the concern with IMVs, the ideologically motivated violent extremists, that we've seen arise within the organization, within the country, and that is a challenge sometimes because people are being radicalized in their basement, at home, where nobody's aware of it. And sometimes people will report people, sometimes we're lucky with intelligence, but that is a concern with the type of environment we're actually working in.
And when you speak of IDMVs, the average Canadian would probably call that terror groups largely. They can be far right, they could be Hamas or ISIS affiliated. There's a whole range, but there's a desire to carry out violence in the name of religion or of ideology. There was a very serious terror plot here just before Christmas in which you arrested a teenager. And I know a lot of it hasn't been made public, but there were explosives, TATP. It was a fairly advanced plot that included dates and targets in Ottawa. After October 7th, I feel like we haven't talked a lot about terrorism in Canada. What is the threat level there?
Well, you look at, I'm not going to comment too much on the file, but here's another example where law enforcement as a service and international partners work well together. The threat right now, obviously October 7th changed the landscape, especially when it comes to hate crime. You look at the incidents that are happening in major cities, it's taxing for police resources that are there because you're seeing a number of demonstrations exceeding the number that they're normally used to.
One of the concerns I know our Five Eyes partners have is foreign interference, and it's such a broad topic, so I want to take it step by step on that one. The first one I wanted to ask you about is one that I hear about from senior national security sources regularly, and that is the concern that organized crime in Canada is actually being used to conduct foreign interference for states like Iran or China, not only to carry out operations, but in some cases to carry out assassinations. Is that a threat that you're seeing?
It is a concern, and again, it's a concern with the Five Eyes, and you're seeing that around the world. If you recall, several months ago, the U.S. indicted 2 Canadians with regards to they were approached by Iran, a contract to actually kill an individual. These 2 people are well known in the outlaw motorcycle world. They were in prison. So it just demonstrates what's going on, and there are others as well that causes concern.
When you look at foreign interference, we keep hearing from the government that not to worry about the allegations on members of parliament because, the RCMP will look into things. But again, I hear from senior sources that it is not as simple as it's being portrayed, that there are not necessarily laws on the books that would allow for all the MPs in question and what's being described, which of course none of us in the public have seen, to be charged criminally. Is it realistic to hand this file to you and say you'll take care of foreign interference with MPs?
And I've read the report. There was not enough elements at the time to switch to forward the file to the RCMP. Since then, I've asked Deputy Commissioner Mark Flynn, who's in charge of the National Security Program, to circle back to the service, see if there's anything changed on the landscape. But you know, I've been hearing everything that's going on a lot since the report was tabled, and I think we got to be cautious about a right to know and a need to know. And I understand parliamentary privilege to a certain extent, but if we start disclosing a lot of this secret information, the top secret information, there's trade crafts involved in that. There's people's lives that could be at risk because sometimes information can come from a single source. So I think we really have to be mindful, and we have to be mindful about the impact we'll have on the international partners who are supplying some of that information.
You mentioned in testimony, I believe it was last week, fairly recently, that you had a number of contracts you were investigating, criminal investigations. Of course, we all know about the ArriveCan investigation, but that it went beyond that, federal contracts that could potentially be fraudulent. Can you tell us what that's about?
Yeah, following the complaint that we had received, and then there was a second complaint that was received. We received several other complaints from departments with regards to the procurement process in which our teams are investigating. The
reality is you don't have a lot of people to carry out these investigations. What is the situation for the RCMP as you try to be both the traffic cops who stop people and give tickets and also the FBI investigating organized crime and terror organizations?
The reality is, Mercedes, if you asked any chiefs of police across this country, do you have enough resources, they would all say no, because we always want to do more. The reality is I have a budget to respect, and we have a pool of resources to which, and it's always been like this in law enforcement, you got to prioritize the work that needs to be done. And we assign the resources to the priority in line with public safety. But what effect does that have on your frontline officers? The RCMP is predominantly in rural areas, but in larger cities, the conversation I've been having with chiefs of police is they're getting tired. It's taxing. Are you concerned about the increase in hate crimes and the increase in what many in the Jewish community have described as intimidating activity outside their homes, outside their synagogues, outside places other than the Israeli embassy or Israeli consulates? Yeah, I am concerned because we've seen a spike since October, and this is no different than all chiefs of police from across the country. But we're working collaboratively together, and we're addressing the situation the best we can. Do you feel the law is being enforced as it could be? I think we could probably do more. I think we could probably do more and a little bit more aggressive when we're looking at what kind of charges that can be laid to a certain individual. And I share this with many people that protesting in front of a member of Parliament's office is one thing, or in Parliament Hill is another. But when you're protesting in front of a resident of an elected official or a senior government official, I think that's where you cross the line, and that's intimidation and even harassment. And I think we have to be more aggressive. And just here in Ottawa last week, there was an upside-down triangle painted on the Jewish Community Centre. The upside-down triangle is a military symbol that Hamas and related military units use to mark targets. I know the RCMP are looking into that. Can you tell me if you have any information or how aggressively you're pursuing that? Yeah, so what starts off as a hate crime, usually it's police jurisdiction. In this case would be Ottawa Police Service that is investigating, and we will bring a national security team just working side by side with them, because if there's an ideology behind it that we can prove it, then you go into terrorist, you can go into different terrorist charges. So we work hand in hand with POJs across the country when it comes to that. It starts up with hate crime, but sometimes it boils up as to much more than just a hate crime. Are you concerned that any of these protests could lead to violence? Oh, for sure. There's any protests when you have a number of people together against a common cause. You have the potential to escalate, that the situation is going to escalate. I find that law enforcement across the country are doing a good job with their liaison program, where they liaise with the organizers to make sure it doesn't get to a point where it gets violent. You mentioned politicians and the threats to them. Marco Mendicino was spit on near Parliament last week. There was a video of this online, and you mentioned the threats to politicians. The Justice Ministers kind of pushed back on your assessment that there need to be new laws. He says you have everything you need on the books. Do you agree with him? Yeah, I think I don't disagree with the Minister of Irani. I think what we have to look at is the totality of the environment we're operating in, and even though there's a criminal threshold to be met, but I'm not quite sure if we're assessing the totality of the environment for the thresholds. Because, as I said earlier, just going in front of a member, elected official, or a government, senior government official with regards to one time in front of the residents, it might not constitute harassment. But if you take the factors that are going on, the geopolitical factors that are going on, the number of demos, I mean, that's in itself, it's intimidation or harassment. But I just think that if we are going to start addressing this, I think we have to take a more aggressive approach.
Commissioner Duheme, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show.
Thanks, Mercedes.
Up next, the House has risen for the summer. Our Inside Politics panel gives us their highlights and lowlights of the session. The House of Commons session is over after a tumultuous time on Parliament Hill.
I wish everyone a safe and restful summer and time to connect with your constituents and with your loved ones.
From leaders sparring over the economy.
We're stepping up for Canadians. They're stepping up for the rich. Why is it that every time he mentions the middle class, they get poor?
And members wary of each other over foreign interference.
This places a cloud of suspicion over every single member of the House, elected members.
Now MPs have risen for the summer break, hitting the barbecue circuit in their ridings, while the Conservative leader has hit the road. Pierre Poilievre has loaded his family into an RV for a campaign-style summer tour, kicking it off in Montreal, where his party hasn't held a seat on the island since 1988. The Prime Minister, meantime, is facing a crucial by-election tomorrow in the heart of Toronto. Traditionally a Liberal stronghold, all eyes will be watching how the Liberals do this time in the riding of Toronto-St. Paul's. To chat about this and the big wins and losses of this parliamentary session are Bob Fife of the Globe and Mail and Stephanie Levitz from the Toronto Star. Great to have you both back on the show. Welcome.
Thank you.
It has been a political season like no other. It's been incredibly busy. All kinds of scandals, controversies, polls moving all over the place. We wanted to ask both of you your thoughts on the top stories, the ones that stood out to you. Steph, starting with you.
I mean, the overarching narrative, I think, since the House came back has been the economy, right? And the fight over it. Who's doing what? Who's doing too much? Who's doing enough? Who is responsible for what's going on? The Liberals really trying to change the narrative. The attacks that Pierre Poilievre has been lobbing at them for so long about them being responsible for everything that's going wrong in the economy, trying to regain some footing, some confidence amongst Canadians that they have this issue under control, finally seizing on housing, finally seizing on the idea of, sort of generational fairness, looking out for younger Canadians. These, of course, both being two issues that Pierre Poilievre has been very strong on and leading in such a way that, polls have him somewhere between 14 points and 20 points ahead of the Liberals, which is crushing for them.
Well, Bob, what stands out? I mean, obviously economy huge too.
Well,
what else
of all,
do you think?
She's right. The number one priority for Canadians is the economy. That's the issue where the Liberals have tried to fight back and are losing. It's the one issue that Mr. Poilievre has been able to win on. But for me, I think there's an issue that Canadians have won on, and that's foreign interference. We've, starting last year, when Global and Globe and Mail did a series of stories on classified documents that outlaid the extent of Chinese foreign interference in the 2019 and 2020 elections, we had a government that dragged its feet, did not want to do anything on that. Finally, we forced a public inquiry, and more significantly, it forced the government, after the first report from Justice Hogue on our public inquiry, we've got legislation that is just passed the Senate. It's been sworn into law, and it's very important because we now have we'll have a foreign agent registry. We're going to make foreign interference a criminal offense, which will finally give the RCMP the tools to be able to investigate and charge people. And CSIS is now going to change the mandate so they can tell people who are being targeted, or parliamentarians, more of what is actually going on. So all of this, to me, has been a big win for the Canadian people. It's not something the government wanted to have happen, but finally we're getting some real significant movement on this.
Well, when I look at both the economy and foreign interference, both of them track to Justin Trudeau. He's someone who's been front and center on the file, of course. He's the Prime Minister. How much do you think these issues have stuck to him? And that makes him really our top story of the season.
Well, I mean, if you take foreign interference as an example, right, the common thread through all of this is that ultimately in our country, the Prime Minister has direct responsibility over only a few things. And one of those things is national security. The buck stops with Justin Trudeau on the foreign interference file. He is the one who absolutely knows what all the intelligence says, who knows all the names, who can know whatever he wants to know. He can pick up the phone and call David Vigneault whenever he feels like it and say, hey, you know, tell me about this thing. And so the fact that the government was refusing and dithering and dallying and ducking and all of the D words I could possibly come up with, turning this into a dumpster fire, to borrow another D word, it says something about this government's competence, I guess, is my overarching point, right? It is fair to say that they alone are not responsible for the economic ills facing this nation. It is complex, it is difficult, it is international, it's about everything from conflict, like global conflict, to the weather. They can't control for that. What they can control for is the safety and security of our country. And so when arguments are being put to Mr. Trudeau about foreign interference, about defense spending, about issues like that, and his competence is being questioned, that's where it becomes so difficult. And so when you have that line of argument, and you also have that parallel argument happening on the economy, hey, buddy, you know, you're making my life worse, and the Liberals being unable to, I think, explain to people in a nice, clean way, when it doesn't seem like they're making excuses, but actually explaining why not all of this is their fault, it puts them in a really tough position.
Bob, the number one question that I get asked by friends, family, viewers when I run into them outside of work is Justin Trudeau going to stay on as the Prime Minister? How does all of this affect his political future?
Well, you're absolutely right, because this is all that anybody in this town is talking about. Not only in this town, but anywhere. And you've hit the nail on the head. The government is tired now. It's had 9 years. It's reached the end of the road in all Canadian governments, whatever political stripe. By the time they get to 9 to 10 years, they're finished. And Mr. Trudeau is at a point now where I don't think he can say anything, because that anybody will either believe or listen to him anymore. I think people have just shut off from listening to him. That's not to say that the Liberal Party is dead, or that they can't beat Mr. Poilievre, but they can't. I don't think they can do it with Justin Trudeau. I think people have had it with him, and as they have with other leaders. So it has nothing to do with a political party or political preference. It's just that's the way our political system operates. But if the Liberals can, and I think he's got till August. If he decides in August to go, then there's enough time. But if he stays after August, there's not going to be time to organize a leadership convention. And I think we should just accept the fact that he's serious about running, and he'll meet his own fate when the election is called. But if he does go, we're going to be able to have some very attractive candidates out there. You know, Philippe-Francois Champagne, for example, the Innovation Minister, Melanie Joly, Mark Carney, the former Bank of Canada and Bank of England governor. There's Krista Freeland. There's some very competent people out there. And if I was Mr. Poilievre, I'd be wishing for Mr. Trudeau to stay.
Steph, one of the things that I hear from Liberal insiders is that they believe part of the reason Justin Trudeau is sticking around is because he genuinely hates Pierre Poilievre. And it's personal, and he wants to run against him. Whatever you think of those two politicians, they're both battling it out. And Mr. Poilievre, of course, is out in an RV, interesting strategy, with his wife, two beautiful children, going around Quebec, glad-handing, meeting people. I'm curious to know what you think of Mr. Poilievre's future in light of Mr. Trudeau's target on him.
I mean, the Quebec summer tour, 'twas ever thus now for elections past that the Conservatives believe they're on the cusp of a breakthrough in Quebec, and they're absolutely going to do it, and they have a strategy, and they're going to get these votes. And Mr. Poilievre, I think, is like leaders, you know, before him who've put a lot of time and energy into Quebec. And one of the interesting things about Quebec for Mr. Poilievre, of course, it's the one place in the country where his poll numbers haven't taken off like a rocket. And some of that is about the complex politics in Quebec, the presence of the Bloc Québécois. But he clearly wants to make inroads there. You know, last summer was really the summer for Mr. Poilievre to go and introduce himself to Canadians. He was coming out of his first parliamentary 2 sessions as a leader. No one really knew him yet. It was, hey, meet me, here's my story. He ditched his glasses, he got new suits. It was the Introduce Me tour. This summer you have to look and wonder What is the ultimate goal for the Poilievre Conservatives? Have they peaked in popularity? That is possible. Polls can only move so much. How do they keep that momentum? How do they broaden out their base of support, keep their base motivated and engaged if we are in fact not looking at an election until the fall of 2025, which seems realistic? Mr. Poilievre has to keep people believing in him. And if the key thing, if there's two key things that are driving his support, one is the sense that the Liberals have lost control of the economy, and two is just exhaustion with the current Liberal government. The exhaustion's not going to go away, but the economy could get better. And it really takes some of the punch out of Mr. Poilievre's argument that he's going to put in front of Canadians.
Last word to you, Bob. We just have a few seconds left, but your thoughts on the Poilievre RV summer tour?
Well, look, I think it's really a smart move because last summer, to Stephanie's point, is that his numbers shot up when people got to see Pierre Poilievre that we didn't see that they often see in the House of Commons being very partisan, but they saw a warmer, humorous family man, and his numbers shot up and have pretty much stayed that way. In Quebec, the numbers have gone up, but not enough to really threaten the Bloc or the Liberals, but they're shooting up. And this is a smart move on his behalf to introduce himself to Quebecers. His wife is fully bilingual, from Quebec, originally from Venezuela. So I'm going to be very interested to see after this tour how the polls react to his summer tour.
Well, we'll all be interested in seeing, of course, which way Toronto-St. Paul goes, a possible indicator for Justin Trudeau's future, and how Pierre Poilievre is received. We'll have you both back here in the fall to take a look at what to expect in the year ahead. Thanks for a fantastic season.
Have a great summer.
The House will resume sitting on September 16th, and this is our last show until then. Coming up, I'll have my thoughts on the season that was. Now for one last thing. As we head into summer, when politicians hit the barbecue and parade circuits, we'll enter our annual summer hiatus. I want to thank some of the people who have worked on this show. You don't see them, but they deserve the credit. Our control room is in Edmonton, making us a truly national show. To Clint and the Edmonton team, thank you for being the voice in my ear. Our camera people, editors, and engineers solve endless technical gremlins, come in early and leave late. Frank, Luigi, Hazlitt, Kaz, Diana, Justin, Aiden, and Tony, the show wouldn't make air without you. Thanks to Sarah, who makes us all look great on camera. And this show is put together by an incredible team of producers. Show producer Denise, who is the host wrangler, enricher of content, and the calmest person I know. Executive producer Bernadette, whose passion and dedication have elevated the West Block. She prefers to be behind the scenes, meticulously supervising to deliver the quality show our viewers deserve. And associate producer Sopal, whose gentle spirit and sharp mind have saved me more times than I can count. We also want to remember a dear friend of the show who passed away suddenly last week, Mark Blanchard. Mark was our brilliant, quirky, miracle-producing, generous technical producer at Global News. He was a legend in the news industry. Mark got this show to air from Latvia to Ukraine, not to mention all over North America. He found ways to get cameras and live feeds to guests worldwide. We will always hear Mark's voice guiding us, but we will miss him so much. Our thoughts are with his family. Thanks for everything, Mark. We'll see you back here in September.